Many years after the Tower of Babel, there was a man named Abram who put all his faith and trust in God. He was a descendant of Shem, one of Noah's sons. Abram was chosen by God for a very important purpose, and he would always be remembered for his great faith. God commands all of us to use the special gifts and abilities He has given us to help others know and follow Jesus. God promises favor on earth and rewards in heaven to all those who obey Him. God said to Abram,
"Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. Because you choose to obey me, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and you will be famous. You will be a blessing and have favor on earth. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who treats you badly. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed."
All these promises were a covenant or agreement between God and Abram. So Abram left his home as God told him. Abram took Sarai his wife, his nephew Lot, and all their belongings, and they traveled to the land of Canaan. Abram was already 75 years old when they started the journey to Canaan. Once they arrived, God appeared to Abram and told him,
"I will give this land to your children."
Abram decided to build an altar to God there and was amazed that God promised this land to his children, even though Abram and Sarai were very old and didn't have any children. Abram then continued to travel with Sarai and Lot. While Abram tried to follow all God's commands, he disobeyed by choosing to take his nephew Lot with him. God told Abram to leave his relatives behind because he knew the problems it would eventually create. As time went on, Abram and Lot's animals and possessions became very large, and there was not enough land and water for both families. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not fight between us. We are family. Isn't there plenty of land all around us? Let's separate our family so there is enough land and water for each of us." Abram allowed Lot to decide which part of the land he wanted. Lot chose a beautiful land called the Jordan Valley, and Abram and his family settled in the land of Canaan. After Lot moved away, God said to Abram,
"Now look all around you in every direction. All the land that you can see is for you and your children forever. I will make your descendants so numerous that they will be like the dust covering the earth."
God chose Abram for a special purpose, a very important part of his plan. God knew that Abram loved him with all his heart, and that he would teach and train his children to love and obey him too. God chose Abram to be the father of his chosen people, the Israelites. Today, we call this race of people the Jews. God also promised that the Messiah, the Savior of all the people in the world, would come from Abram's descendants. This Messiah was Jesus, and through him, every single promise from God would be fulfilled. Now Abram and Sarai had lived many years in the land of Canaan. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am the Almighty God. I will make my covenant between me and you will become the father of many nations. You will no longer be called Abram. Your name will now be called Abraham, and your wife Sarai will now be called Sarah." As God was speaking to Abraham, he fell face down onto the ground. God told Abraham, "You will have many descendants after you. Your family will increase in number, and kings will come from your family line."
This covenant between us will last forever. This is my promise to you."
Abraham never forgot what God had promised him many years before. At that time, the Lord came to Abram in a vision and said,
"Fear not, Abram. I am your shield and great reward."
Then God brought Abram out of his tent and pointed at the night sky filled with stars and said,
"Now, look to the heavens and count the stars. If you are able to count them, so your children will be."
Abram had faith and believed that God would one day fulfill that promise. Then God told Abraham,
"As for your wife Sarah, I will bless her, and I will give you a son by her."
When Abraham heard this, he was so surprised that he laughed and asked God, "Will a man who is 100 years old and a woman who is 90 have a child?" But God answered Abraham,
"Your wife Sarah will have a son, and you will call him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him and all his family, and my covenant will never end. I will return to you about this time next year, and by then your wife Sarah will have a son."
Abraham's wife Sarah just happened to be listening behind the door of the tent, and she began laughing at the thought of having a baby in her old age and said, "Will I really have a child when Abraham and I are so old?" Then God said to Abraham,
"Why did Sarah laugh? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you next year, and you will have a son."
This scared Sarah very much, so she replied, "I did not laugh." But God answered and said,
"Yes, Sarah, you did laugh."
The following year, just as God had promised to Abraham and Sarah, they had a son, and they named him Isaac. By the faith of Abraham and Sarah, they received from God the gift of a son, Isaac. And even though they were very old, from their son Isaac came many descendants, as many as the stars in heaven and grains of sand by the seashore. Abraham and his wife Sarah had been called by God to leave their own country and go settle in the land of Canaan. Abraham's nephew, Lot, and his family followed them to Canaan as well. Their flocks and herds of animals grew so large that they had to separate and live in different regions of the land. Lot and his family moved to the region of Sodom, which was also near the city of Gomorrah. Both cities were filled with very evil and wicked men who did not honor the word of God. One day, Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. Abraham bowed down as he realized that it was the Lord and 2 angels that had come to visit him. Abraham said, "Lord, please allow me to bring you fresh water and feed you from my animals." The Lord agreed and sat down to eat and drink with Abraham. As soon as the visitors were finished with the meal, they all rose to leave. The Lord turned to Abraham and said,
"I have heard many evil and wicked things about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I am here to see if their sins are as great as I have been told."
The 2 angels began walking toward the cities, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham asked the Lord, "Lord, Are you going to destroy the righteous people along with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people within the city? Will you please spare the city for the 50?
The Lord answered, If I find 50 righteous people in the city, then I will not destroy it.
Then Abraham asked, My Lord, what if 45 righteous people can be found? Would you please spare the city then? Again the Lord answered,
I will not destroy it if I find 45 of my righteous people in the city.
Abraham continued to ask God's favor over the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah until he got down to 10 righteous people. At last Abraham said, Lord, please do not be angry with me, but what if just 10 righteous people are found? Would you spare the city then? In God's great mercy, he answered,
Even if there are just 10 righteous people in the city, I will not destroy it.
When the Lord finished speaking to Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned to his tent. By now the 2 angels had arrived at the city of Sodom. Abraham's nephew, Lot, was sitting at the gate of the city. He immediately bowed to them and begged them to come and stay at his house for the night, where he could feed them and they could safely stay the night in the wicked and evil city. Just as they were all getting ready to go to bed, people from all over Sodom came to Lot's house and called out to Lot from outside and said,
Bring your visitors outside to us.
Lot refused because he knew of their wickedness and went outside to plead with them to leave his visitors alone. The people of Sodom became so angry, they tried to grab Lot and break down his door. But the angels of the Lord reached out and grabbed Lot and pulled him back into the house to safety. The angels struck the men of Sodom with blindness, and they could no longer find the door. When morning came, the 2 angels told Lot to take his wife and 2 daughters and escape out of the city. When Lot hesitated, they grabbed the hands of Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters and brought them outside the city. The angels told Lot, Take your wife and 2 daughters and run as quickly as you can to the mountains, where you will be safe, and do not look behind you. As Lot and his family were fleeing for their lives, his wife looked behind her and was turned into a pillar of salt. God rained down burning sulfur and fire from heaven and completely burned up the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the surrounding land filled with plants and animals. Early the next morning, as Abraham looked down upon the burned and ruined cities below, he knew God remembered his righteousness and the righteousness of Lot and his family, and delivered them all to safety. Abraham was 100 and his wife Sarah was 90 when, just as God had promised, they had a son and named him Isaac. Isaac was their only child, and they loved him with all their hearts. As Isaac grew into a young boy, Abraham taught Isaac to love God and to follow all the commands that God put before them. One day, God spoke to Abraham.
Abraham.
Very quickly, Abraham replied, Here I am, Lord. Then God said,
I want you to take your son, Isaac, your only son that you love so much, and go to a mountain in the region of Moriah, and place him on an altar and sacrifice him.
Now this grieved and saddened the heart of Abraham because he loved his only son, Isaac, so much. The next morning, with a heavy heart, Abraham saddled his donkey. He gathered enough wood for the burnt offering, and then he took Isaac and 2 of his young men that worked with him, and they began the journey to the region of Moriah. They had traveled 3 days when Abraham looked up and saw a mountain in the distance. He told the young men, Stay here while Isaac and I go to the mountain to worship. Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering upon Isaac, picked up a stick of fire and his knife, and began to travel toward the mountain. As they were traveling, Isaac said, "Father?" Abraham said, "Yes, my son." Isaac said, "We have fire and wood for a burnt offering, but we don't have a lamb." Abraham answered, "My son, God himself will provide a lamb for the burnt offering." So they continued to the mountain together. Soon they reached the place that God had told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as a burnt offering. He tied up Isaac's arms and gently laid him on an altar where he had placed the wood. Then he took the knife and prepared to kill his son, Isaac. Suddenly, Abraham heard an angel of the Lord call out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" And Abraham replied, "Here I am, Lord." And the angel said, "Do not lay a hand upon the son that you love so much. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God and will obey all that I ask of you. You have proven that you will not withhold your only son that you love." Just then, Abraham looked up, and there, tangled in the branches of a bush, was a ram caught by his horns. He knew then that God had provided this ram as a sacrifice instead of his beloved son, Isaac. Then the angel of the Lord said a second time, "Abraham, the Lord declares, because you have obeyed all that I ask and have not withheld your only son, whom you love, I will multiply all your descendants as many as the stars in the sky and the sand of the seashores. All nations on earth will be blessed through your descendants, because you have obeyed me." Abraham, Sarah, and their son Isaac became very wealthy through the blessings of God as they continued to live in the land of Canaan and do all that God had commanded them to do. Sadly, at the age of 127, Sarah passed away. Abraham buried Sarah in a cave on the land that he purchased from a man that lived in Canaan. Now Isaac had grown into a man and had never married. So his father Abraham called the chief servant in his household and said, "Please promise me that you will go to the country I came from and find a wife for my son Isaac." Abraham insisted that Isaac marry a woman from the country he was born in, so that the word God spoke to Abraham many years before would be fulfilled. "To your offspring I will give this land." Then the chief servant took 10 of Abraham's camels and many valuable gifts with him and set out for the land of Mesopotamia, where Abraham's relatives lived. When the chief servant arrived in the region where Abraham's family lived, he stopped by a well to water his animals. He quickly began to pray for a way to recognize the girl that God had chosen for Isaac. He asked God, "O Lord, please give me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. When a girl comes to the well to fill her pitcher of water, and I ask for a drink, and she says, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one you have chosen for Abraham's son Isaac. By this I will know she is the one." Soon after, a beautiful young woman came to the well to fill her pitcher with fresh water. The chief servant hurried to meet her and asked, "Please, would you give me a little water from your jar?" She replied, "Drink from this jar, and I will water your camels as well." While she was busy watering the camels, the chief servant watched closely to see if she was the girl that God had chosen for Isaac. He then asked her, "What is your name, and whose daughter are you?" She replied, "My name is Rebekah, and I am the daughter of Bethuel, who is the son of Nahor." Then the chief servant bowed down and worshipped the Lord God of Abraham, saying, "I praise you, God, that you led me straight to Abraham's relatives. Now I pray that this beautiful woman of God will agree to return with me to become the wife of Isaac." Rebekah ran home and told her mother what had happened at the well. Her brother Laban went to the well and invited the chief servant to their home to give him and his animals rest and food. The chief servant shared the story with Rebekah's family and asked if she would return with him and marry Isaac. The family agreed that God had directed this plan, and it was up to Rebekah to make the decision. She decided to leave her family and become the wife of Isaac in the land of Canaan. The servant then brought out gold, jewelry, and costly gifts from Abraham and gave them to the family of Rebekah. Early the next morning, after receiving blessings from her family, Rebekah, her nurse, and the chief servant set out for the long journey home. After traveling a long time, Rebekah looked up and saw a man standing in the field coming to meet them. She got down from her camel and asked, "Who is that?" The chief servant replied, "It is Isaac, the man you are to marry." Isaac and Rebekah were soon married, and he loved her very much. Esau traded his firstborn birthright to his brother, Jacob, for a bowl of stew. When Rebekah saw that their father, Isaac, was not going to honor the agreement Jacob and Esau made, she talked to Jacob into tricking Isaac to give him the blessing of the firstborn instead of Esau. This made Esau so angry that he began plotting to kill Jacob. When Jacob found out about Esau's plan to kill him, he became very afraid and decided to run away to his mother's relatives that lived in the land of Mesopotamia. On his way across the desert to the land of Mesopotamia, the sun began to set, and he decided to camp for the night and get some rest. He laid a stone under his head for a pillow and fell into a deep sleep. That night, Jacob had an unforgettable dream. He saw a ladder that was set on the earth that reached all the way to heaven. Many glorious angels were going up and down the ladder from heaven to earth. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and your father Isaac. I will give to you and to all your descendants the land that you are lying on. Your descendants will be spread out in all directions, as many as the dust of the earth. I am with you and will watch over you and bless you wherever you go." When Jacob woke up from his dream, he realized that God was truly the Lord and would be with him always and protect him wherever he went. Just as God had spoken to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac, God had also spoken to him to always trust the promises of God. The next day, Jacob continued his journey to find his mother's family in the land of Mesopotamia. When he arrived, he was happily welcomed into his mother's family. He soon fell in love with a girl named Rachel and wanted to marry her. Unfortunately, he was tricked into marrying her older sister Leah first. Eventually, he married his first love, Rachel, as well. Together with his wives and children, Jacob worked hard and became very wealthy in livestock and possessions. God told Jacob to return to his family in Canaan, so he packed up his wives, children, and many herds of animals that he had obtained over the years and began the long journey home. He still had great fear over how Esau would treat him when he returned. He had not forgotten Esau's plan to kill him before he had left his family. One night, as Jacob and his family were getting close to the country he came from, he sent his family and all his livestock and possessions ahead of him across a stream to camp for the evening. Jacob chose to stay alone by the stream that night. Suddenly, a man came to Jacob and began wrestling with him. They wrestled the entire night, with neither one winning the match. Finally, daybreak came, and the man realized that he could not overpower Jacob. The man touched Jacob's hip and caused his hip to come out of the socket. The man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man blessed him and said, "Your name is no longer Jacob. It is now Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Then Jacob realized that he had seen God face to face that night, and God had spared his life. The dream of the stairway to heaven and the wrestling match with God never left Jacob's mind. Both events were proof to Jacob that no matter how difficult or frightening life can be, he could always believe and trust in the promises of God.